Hi everybody. Hi everybody. Hi everybody. It's your friend Daniel Hutchins. We're back again on another episode of the Hutchins Hut. So what are we doing? We're gonna read a little bit about what happened this summer. Yeah, now since it's a final unofficial day of summer. We call it the final unofficial day of summer. Today is Labor Day. Yep, today's Labor Day, the unofficial end of summer. The unofficial end of summer. Okay, what are we talking about? What were the Hollywood box office fails? Okay, what are the Hollywood box office fails? We are reading this from our friend, the LA Times newspaper. Of course. Okay, Lilo and Stitch, Superman, and a flock of creepy children have drawn audience to the movie theater this summer. However, it's not enough to jolt enough box office money past even the dreary river that reached last year. Theatrical haul for the summer of this summer. Um, Industry watchers, critics, and everybody else, and all fans alike, from the first weekend of May until today, the Labor Day, today's Labor Day, grossed $3.5 billion in the United States and Canada. It was actually down a little bit by 2024, which had also had that same amount, but kind of a little bit. But according to the scores, numbers are even more sombering compared to what we saw in 2023 with Barbie and Oppenheimer. That also had reached about 4 billion. However, it used to be hidden really well. Although the season has started with high hope and all that, the Sinners, the Minecraft movie, and several other big franchise movies on that lineup, some movies had failed and some had lived. Okay? Theaters have been grappling on decline audience since before the pandemic and through the COVID 19 shutdown, which has kind of exuberated the trend as we know in 2020. Audiences get to use the streaming movies from home option on mid tier level films and comedies and migrated over to the platforms, making it rare to see them in the box office. Hollywood and their studios have now continued to suffer from the over reliance on their franchise and that they are losing steam. Series of massive hits can change the mood for those that were lacking this summer. For starters, there hasn't been really as much of a hit on Walt Disney this year, or Marvel, or anything like that. However, Disney's live action adaptation of Lilo and Stitch was the biggest hitter of the summer, and it also has made over $1 billion, making it Disney's best movie this year. Going into the summer, many of the industry felt the major effect and the Mandela effect on the pandemic and how these writers and actor strikes in 2023 have revamped the theater and their lineup. The planned release of several of those franchises, including some of the stuff like Jurassic World and Warner Brothers and Marvel, their stuff also been distributed later. However, we know that because we've seen it. So then, while these movies put up big numbers, most of them are not so impressive. In fact, Jurassic World is the worst movie this summer. And then Fantastic Four has plummeted. Yes, Fantastic Four has plummeted in the theaters. So many of these movies have failed internationally, most of which are Fantastic Four and Superman, which made a lot less movies overseas, other than the success we saw in the United States and in Canada. However, Superman in particular has suffered a little bit of a fate because it's basically explicit to America and their idea. They weren't so many flops, they said, but there still kind of was a lot of flops. So, yeah, okay. So, this is from a guy named Eric Handler, a media entertainment analyst. Everything did okay, but not as huge as the other years. These big blockbuster movies have also tended to skewed toward the men and less for the females. Because come on, we're men. We love action films. We love actions. Okay? Now, compared to other years, there's been some breakout hits that are kind of strong, he said, but this was lacking this year. this summer just ugh. On top of that, several films straight up bombed. Most of them, like Megan 2.0 and Elio, which is the lowest Pixar movie ever. The mist has reignited the debate audience interest in the original animated film, and the box office sequel trend has kind of plummeted. Therefore, if you want to hammer home to it, go to Netflix and watch K-pop Demon Hunters. That has become a special phenomenon which we have mentioned yet before. Well, a few times. Well, briefly actually. Though even though Netflix does not disclose box office numbers, they basically have this girl group called the K-pop Demon Hunters that fights all these demons and features very high-tone octave ideas. Although that was a number one, if that was a number one movie, then it would have been different, but it wasn't. So there's that to take into account. That translates into sold-out shows, particularly for young audiences, and the popularity mostly being at Regal Cinemas. So we saw a big uptake in the young audience in the theater this year, they said, and in the UK, especially where they had Minecraft. The young demographic of movies have oftentimes been pretty good, like Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon. However, they're really trying to hope and create a idea for next year, they said. But however, with the cinema groups like Regal and Cinemark and AMC, you get a lot of younger demographic there, and so the movie goes to the future, or the young people. Yes, the young people. The young people. Yes, the young people. So then there also was a Warner Brothers movie called Weapons. But that movie only sold about 43.5 million in the longevity of their office run. However, they've grossed kind of fairly, but not so much. Industry analysts and inside critics say that September's results have to be softer than last year's because, like, come on. Last year we had Beetlejuice, and now for this fall we have James Cameron's new Avatar, Fire and Ash. We got the second part of Wicked, and we also are getting Zootopia 2. Yes, Zootopia 2. Yeah, I know, right? And you thought the first one was it. Nope, you're wrong. So then, 2025 is shaping up to be a weaker than we hoped we were. But again, the end total says otherwise. That, again, it will kind of have to be different when 2026 rolls around, which will be in 4 or 5 months. However, we can only hope and pray that the box office movies next year will perform better than this year. But I am kind of feeling a little skeptical, and as you should be skeptical as well and concerned about this as well. So I'll see you later.